Good evening and welcome back to the Tuesday Night Live podcast. We are back after our winter break and we are ready to preview the F1 2019 season here live on YouTube, and we are also available on other podcasting services like Spotify and whatever other podcast sites are out there. Honestly, don't know. I would say I don't care, but it is quite cool that we are out there. Hopefully we are live this time, because I was rambling on for 10 minutes before before good old Toby told us that we weren't live. But yeah, I don't know what happened there. I did the exact same thing as I always do, and yeah, I just assume that because we haven't done it for a while, I must have messed something up. But blame Toby, because he actually scheduled the stream. So anyway, it's nice to be back after, I don't know, 3 months that we've done. I think the last one we did was the European Super League discussion.
October, I think, the end of October.
Was it October? Because we did our F1 season review quite early, because obviously Hamilton wrapped up the championship. But tonight we're going to be talking about F1 2019 and sort of the teams, the drivers, even regulation changes, and we'll give our full predictions as well. We've got Excel spreadsheets this time of our predictions, so we can actually go back and reference them rather than send Toby to do it in the middle of a stream, which will be fun. And hopefully you guys will enjoy that on this wonderful evening of Brexit confusion and all of that. But good evening to Toby. How has your winter been, and are you excited for the F1 2019 season to start?
I think it's fair to say that this season is the most anticipated for a long while. The most I can remember for years. I think even the 2014 season, when the turbos first came in, the V6s, the anticipation for that is nowhere near the anticipation for this season. There's so many driver changes. There's a little bit of regulation change, but the most important thing is that there are a lot of driver changes. There are a lot of big boys, a lot of big guns that it's a massive season for them, and equally that's the same down the grid. And I think we're in for a brilliant campaign, as long as Hamilton doesn't win the championship.
Yeah, obviously, you know, your opinions coming through there. Just to address something in the chat, I haven't moved house. We've just got rid of the green screen for the podcast. I think, you know, I did a channel update without the green screen recently, and I just thought it's a bit more personal when, you know, we've got the green screen down. It's a bit more laid back, so that's the decision there. But yeah, we might as well get straight into it. We are going to go team by team, and obviously the most sensible place to start, I think, is at the top with Mercedes, who have won 5 back-to-back drivers and constructors championship. They equalled the record with Ferrari, who did it from 2000 to 2004, and they're going for the double six this year, which, you know, it would be an incredible achievement, and if anybody can do it, Mercedes can do it. Discuss.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think they can or not, but I don't think they will. I think they can, but I don't think they will. I think if we look at testing for a very short minute, we're not going to look at much testing, because I think we both agree that even though I managed to watch pretty much the whole week of the first testing, there's not really much to read into it. The testing is so much affected by fuel, by tyres, etc., etc. I think it's fair to say Mercedes sandbagged quite a bit in that testing, and they didn't show their true potential. However, I think the driver that's going to let them down, we'll go into this in so much more detail, but just an opening comment, I think there's a real potential that Bottas could let them down massively. And I think this season and again, not too much detail, Ferrari have changed their lineup. Leclerc's in instead of Kimi, Gasly's in instead of Ricciardo at Verstappen. There is more competition at the other two teams, and I think that if Bottas lets the side down, it won't be 6 in a row for Mercedes, even though Hamilton might win the championship. And in fact, Bottas might finish 6th, which just seems bonkers, doesn't it? Even though Hamilton might win the championship.
Yeah, it's crazy, and obviously last season had Vettel and Raikkonen pushed Mercedes a little bit more, then it might have actually cost them the constructors last year if Bottas's performances, unfortunately. But does Joe have any F1 merch? I do, but I don't have it on. Couldn't be bothered. But yeah, the team, obviously, as you say, in testing it doesn't look like a world beater at the moment. I think they've stayed fairly stable over the winter in terms of staff changes, and obviously the drivers have stayed the same. One of the few teams to keep the same driver lineup, might even be the only team. I can't think of another one. Haas haven't, yeah. Haas, and Racing Point have had the same drivers since whenever Stroll took over, at least in our minds, anyway. But I think Mercedes have shown the last few years that they're very good at developing a car, and I think that's what Ferrari have to prove this year. But we'll talk about Ferrari later. So you think Bottas is going to underperform again this year, and obviously
I wouldn't say I think so. I more fear it than think it.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm a Bottas fan. I'm a bit of a Bottas fan. We took the mick I had to him last year, but I think it's impossible not to take the mick the way he was driving. And I do fear that he's not going to do very well. I mean, I have been watching the Netflix documentary, the F1 documentary, which for any of you out there is a brilliant one to watch if you've got Netflix. I completely recommend that. But that shows the really good start to the season that Bottas had. He could have won in Baku if it wasn't for that puncture. He definitely had a race win there. You look at China.
Well, it was Russia as well, wasn't it?
Car didn't come out at the wrong time. And in Austria, he retired from the front, and in Russia he could have won as well. So equally, he could have won 4 races that year and didn't win any. I know that's not an excuse, because some weekends he was rubbish. But I think if he's on his A game this year, he can be in the mix. But I fear, as I said, I don't think, but I fear that he won't do very well. And I think with Hamilton alongside him, he could very easily be thrashed, and Mercedes won't take that for another year.
Well, that's the thing. I think it was fairly surprising that Mercedes actually kept him on, and but I think quite tellingly that they're only giving him 1-year contracts. They're splashing the cash with Hamilton giving him 3-year contracts and whatever bonuses he wants, basically. And obviously Bottas has only been getting 1-year contracts. So it'll be interesting to see how that story develops through the year. I think Hamilton will be on his game again, but equally, if things aren't going his way, could this be his last year in F1? You have to ask those sorts of questions. But I don't know whether we want to do our predictions for Mercedes right now, or should we leave it a little bit later?
I think there's a bit more to discuss about Mercedes.
Yeah.
I think that Hamilton's I don't think there's any dispute between the two of us that Hamilton's going to beat Bottas.
Yeah.
Overall, so. Yeah. Therefore, we feel that Bottas won't win the championship. But how highly do you feel? I know that we've got different opinions. I don't want to disclose that at the moment in terms of what we've gone for in our rankings. But as a percentage, how likely do you think the case is that Lewis will win the championship?
It's difficult. It really depends how good this Mercedes car is. I think if it's within range of Ferrari, then I think Hamilton will win the championship just by virtue of his consistency over the last few years. I think he's very used to winning over the last 5 years, and he could have quite easily won all 5 of those championships. And I think Vettel, as much as he won a hell of a lot in his 4 years from 2010 to 13, I'm not sure he's really tasted much of the victory, recently. Certainly not unexpected victory. I know Lewis is expected to win every race, but I think he just sometimes, when you like Singapore, for example, when you expect him to be rubbish, he comes out with a really good performance and ends up winning it by however much he won it by, 30 seconds or something, I think. Whereas I don't think Vettel has had a surprising victory per se in the last few years, and I don't know. My opinion is Vettel is Ferrari's best chance of winning the championship at this present time. I know you might have a different opinion, but I think Hamilton has a good chance of winning this year, but it all depends how quick that Mercedes is at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I think that Mercedes, we've known in the last few years that they are the best developers throughout a season, although Red Bull have got a brilliant chassis they have done in the last few years, and if the Honda engine does perform, it's interesting to see how they can do that. But I think Mercedes are definitely the top dogs going into the season now. They are the favourites, sorry. They are the favourites going into this season. But it's how well they can pull that off. Because I feel compared to seasons gone by, they aren't the favourites so much. That could suit them more than it doesn't, actually, because if they are less fancied, they might do better. But until we get to Spain or Monaco, I don't truly think that... I don't truly know, and none of us will truly know the pace of that Mercedes, because we always know that Ferrari start the season well, and other teams will start the season well. So we don't know about that, but I think realistically, in the long haul, Hamilton's got a pretty big chance of the title again. I think we both have the same opinion there, but it all depends on other teams. It all depends on Mercedes, and they've developed well again, I think. But yeah, I think that's really, for the moment, all about Mercedes. I think it's, in summary, it's a huge year for Bottas. I think that if he doesn't perform at the start, he could be out by mid-season. I'll ask you in a minute who you think might replace him if that happens. I know who will replace him. And it's also a little bit of pressure for Hamilton as well. There's kind of that expectation there that he can get up to Schumacher's 7 titles because he's won the 5. It's not out of his reach anymore. If he wins another one, it's only one away. And there's that little bit of pressure on Lewis, but I'm sure he'll thrive under that. But who knows?
It sort of also puts him in between Fangio. It gives him his own record. Do you know what I mean? Like 6 world titles, puts him on his own. You know. Where's at the moment? He's obviously with Fangio, and Vettel's within one of them. But if he goes within 2 of Vettel, then I as far as I'm concerned, you can't mention Vettel and Hamilton in the same breath, really. But anyway, I think that's Mercedes done for now. We'll talk a little bit more about them later, sort of when we talk about the whole F1 season. But we'll move on to their closest competitors over the last few years. And I'm absolutely sick of hearing how they should have won the championship last year, but they haven't won the constructors since 2008, and obviously haven't won the drivers since 2007. And that is Ferrari. They're arguably the biggest name in the sport, and a big change there this season with Leclerc taking over your favourite driver, Kimi Räikkönen.
Don't know how you figured that one out.
And he's joined Sebastian Vettel at the team this season. So, what are your thoughts about Ferrari? Obviously, very highly tipped to be the fastest car this year, which nothing in testing suggested otherwise, but as we've said before, testing is very, very risky to analyse with that sort of thing. But what are your thoughts about Ferrari's chances this year?
Well, just answer me one question first. What's the common theme about Ferrari in the last sort of 6 or 7 years? I mean, even in just last year. What's the common theme? What's that one word that sums up Ferrari? They had such a good car last year, yet they didn't do anything with it.
A bottle job? I don't know. That
Pretty
sort
much.
of thing.
Disappointment was more I was going for.
Yeah, disappointment, I guess.
And I think that's the same this year. I honestly do. I don't think that Ferrari will be as good as they feel they will. I think this is, as well as it is for Valtteri Bottas, it is the biggest year of Sebastian Vettel's career. And I'm going to come out with the biggest statement of the night so far. If Leclerc beats him, driver to driver, unless something crazy happens, for example, Vettel misses a race or Vettel has so many mechanical failures out of his control. If Leclerc beats him on several occasions, driver to driver, fair equipment, it will be Vettel's last season in Formula 1. Make of that what you will. So it is a massive year for Sebastian Vettel, although it's a big opportunity for Vettel as well.
Yeah.
He's had... I don't like talking about Kimi in this way, but I am going to. He's had what a lot of people think is a relatively easy opponent in the last few years in Kimi, and all of a sudden Leclerc's in now, and Leclerc is this up-and-coming driver who performed really well in the Sabre last year. Personally, I don't think he's as good as people make him out to be, but that will be proven this year in a top car. And it's a huge year for Vettel. It's a complete opposite of a win-win. It's just... he just doesn't win in any situation unless he wins the championship. If he beats Leclerc man to man, people will say, well, he's expected to. He's a 4-time world champion. But of course, if he loses to Leclerc, there's that, oh dear. It's kind of like the Hamilton and Alonso thing when Hamilton and Alonso were at McLaren together in '07. Hamilton went and beat Alonso, and the reigning world champion was beaten by this youngster. I know it's not exactly the same situation, but it's quite comparable.
It's the same as Ricciardo and Vettel in 2014. Yeah.
And ever since then, ever since that year of Ricciardo, he's only had Kimi as a teammate.
Yeah.
So it'll be very interesting to see how that dynamic works. Whether there'll be any tension between the two, I can't really see it. I think that Vettel will still be number one from Ferrari. Mm-hmm. But the question is there any chance of either driver winning the title? And is there any chance of Leclerc winning the title, in your opinion?
I think there is. There's always a chance. It depends. Again, it depends how close they are to Mercedes. If we turn it the other way and say Mercedes are faster, and how close are Ferrari to that Mercedes, and if those two are on a level playing field, then Leclerc does have a chance. Of course he does. I think momentum is going to play a big part this season, especially if it's really close. It's going to be mightily important who comes out of the blocks quick out of Vettel and Leclerc. If Leclerc is lagging behind the first 5 races, you can count him out of the championship because Ferrari are going to throw everything behind Vettel. But if Leclerc goes and wins on Sunday, then it's a totally different situation because people are just going to go mad about it, like they did about Verstappen when he won in Spain. When he came in, he beat Daniel Ricciardo.
You really don't like Verstappen, do you?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, people were going from sort of saying, oh, very harsh on Kvyat. Kvyat should have still been in that seat. Why is Verstappen there? Which, there's some parallels there with Kimi and Leclerc. And then bam, Verstappen goes and wins Spain, and people are like, "Oh, he's fantastic! He's gonna win 900 world titles, and all of that, this and that." But anyway, we'll talk about him in a minute. But Ferrari have obviously had a lot of changes over the winter with their management, which they've done before. It's nothing new. Pretty much since Stefano Domenicali went back in 2014, I want to say, something like that. They've had a new team principal pretty much every year, and that's obviously not working for them. But we'll see what happens this season. As you say, I think it's a massive year for Vettel, because if he gets beaten by an up-and-coming teammate again, it really does question his long-term abilities in F1, and unless he is an undoubted number one in the a car that's half a second quicker than the field, he can't win a championship. Is basically what it's coming down to. But as I said before, I'm really sick of people saying about last season, saying Ferrari threw it away, all the mistakes from Vettel threw it away, and at the end of the day,
Lewis Hamilton won that championship. Lewis Hamilton drove well. I mean, I'm not one to praise Lewis usually, but although the incident that seemed to have changed the championship was Vettel at Hockenheim, I think that was proven that weekend, was that even though Hamilton had a terrible qualifying, he pushed through the field, and from then there was no stopping him. Of course, it was a bit of momentum for Lewis, but Ferrari didn't bottle it. Lewis won that, hands down, and it's usual Ferrari. Mercedes developed better through the season, and yeah, I think Hamilton just thrives on that occasion, and fair play to him. So yeah, I'm a little bit sick of that as well. It's a little bit like the argument that Hamilton, and I know this is going to sound a bit contradictory, this is like the argument that, well, Hamilton only lost the championship because his car blew up in Malaysia.
Yeah.
Like, he had plenty. I know that he won the next few races, but he had plenty of opportunities over the season. If he was so good compared to Rosberg, then he would have gained those 25 points elsewhere.
There was a few.
It's a view.
There was a few races that season that Hamilton was just nowhere. I remember it well. Like, sort of, you would just have weekends where Hamilton was, half a second off the pace of Rosberg, and just, but that's a previous season. There's no point talking about that now. So Ferrari, final thoughts of them. I think it's a massive year, not just for Vettel, but for Ferrari as well. If they mess it up again, say they have the fastest car in inverted commas, they make a load of mistakes this year and Hamilton wins the championship, massive questions have to be asked about them. And, especially if Leclerc doesn't live up to expectations and he's a failure, but that's a discussion for down the line. So we'll talk about where we predict those drivers to be and obviously where the team are going to be later in the podcast. But do you have any final thoughts about Ferrari before we move on?
Someone in the chat needs to get a bold prediction count ready, because this is going to be our second bold prediction of the night. Leclerc will beat Vettel in the championship. On to Red Bull.
Okay. So, Red Bull. We're going to have plenty more of them tonight, so, get ready for it. Red Bull, obviously, 4-time world champions from 2010 to 13. They've moved from the Renault engine that they had for 12 years, and they've moved on to the Honda-powered engine, which McLaren had a lot of trouble with, or blamed a lot on, we like to say. And there's a lot of positivity surrounding Red Bull at the moment, and they've got a really young driver lineup. Obviously, Pierre Gasly's come in this year, and Verstappen is, in many people's opinion, the best driver in the championship. So, yeah, Red Bull. How are they going to do this season? Do you think the move to Honda is going to be a fruitful one for them?
I think the move to Honda is incredibly positive. I think that their relationship with Renault, their relationship with Cyril Abiteboul, the head of Renault, the team principal, had turned massively sour, and there was no way that they were going to recover that ultimately. It was a relationship that was never going to be recovered, and moving away was the only thing they could have done. As is the relationship between Ricciardo and Red Bull, hence why he's gone to Renault. Mm-hmm. But more on Ricciardo later. I think that Red Bull will benefit because they will almost be the equivalent as a factory team. We've got Renault, we've got Mercedes, we've got Ferrari, but Red Bull become the, in effect, factory team, de facto factory team for Honda, because although you've got Toro Rosso, which a good tactical move there actually, because, and I think this was all planned before, that there was a lot of hype that, the relationship sounded rubbish. They kind of, in their heart of hearts, decided to go to Honda the end of 2017, in my opinion. Just pending on how well the Toro Rosso did under the Honda. Mm-hmm. First, just a point about Honda. The progress of McLaren shows that them blaming Honda did nothing. That it wasn't Honda's fault, and that's a real shame. But luckily, I think with Red Bull, that Honda have got a real chance to not replicate, but to make sure that their reputation is enhanced and that they can get back to the top in terms of their reputation, the sort of reputation they had with the Marlboro cars, or not the Marlboro cars, was it Marlboro with McLaren back in the early 90s with Senna? It was, wasn't it? I can't remember. I feel like a right idiot now, but nonetheless.
Before my time.
It's before my time as well. I'm not as old as you think. Let me just check. This is written. Yes, it was Marlboro. Thank God. Right, I don't feel like a complete idiot now, but I've gone completely off topic. Right, Red Bull. The move to Honda's good. I think I've specified why the move is good. And it's one that throws a lot of intrigue with me, because the Honda's not a slow engine. The Honda, at some races, had the quickest speed trap of the lot. Mm-hmm. Now, that either suggests one of two things. Toro Rosso have no downforce, or that the engine is fast. Mm-hmm. And that is something that Red Bull have not had over the years. Now, if it's the first option, if there's no downforce, that's a worry. Mm-hmm. That might be a Toro Rosso problem rather than a Red Bull problem. Or it suggests that that's fast, and that complements the fact that that car is quick in the corners. I think, honestly, there is a real outside shout. If you were talking about horse, it's certainly worth an each-way bet that Red Bull will win the Constructors this year. I feel really positively about Red Bull.
Yeah.
The bold prediction of last year of mine, which I don't particularly like to go into because I was made a bit of a mug, is that McLaren were going to finish second in the Constructors. Well, actually, no, we're not going to do pole predictions for just yet. It's a little bit early.
Not yet, yeah.
Not yet.
Well, we need to keep some people in.
Exactly. But your original question, the move to Honda's a really good one, and I think that both drivers will thrive as a result. I think the team atmosphere, I think that the team is in a general consensus will move forward, as will the whole Red Bull and Toro Rosso family.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you touched on it before about them becoming now a factory team. The last time they were a factory team was 2014 when they were the factory Renault team, and they actually finished second in the championship that year, despite I think they finished second in the championship. I'm pretty sure Ferrari were terrible that year, but I might be wrong. And obviously the year before 2014 was their dominant reign in F1. So I think it's a positive move. I think it's probably a bit too early to suggest that they're going to be leading the way. I think they had a little bit of a troublesome testing period, just sort of with reliability / drivers crashing, which, in testing is a big no-no, isn't it? Because they only get 8 testing days a year, and to lose one of them to a crash is just stupidity. But Pierre Gasly's obviously took the step up. He had a decent season last year, it's fair to say, at Toro Rosso, stepping up to that team, and obviously had Brendan Hartley as a teammate, and I know you rate Brendan highly. But this year it's a massive test for him, coming up against Max Verstappen, who, has arguably been the most talked about driver over the last few years, rightly or wrongly. Some of his driving has got us to say how great he is, and some of it has said otherwise. But it's a massive test for Pierre Gasly, and do you think he could be another victim of the caveat sort of period of Red Bull?
Possibly. Just a quick break for those on the YouTube side. I have to say, I'm watching this discussion you have in the comments with close eyes. I think that what you're discussing is really interesting about the top 6 divide. And that's something I think we will discuss one of the weeks.
No, definitely, yeah.
But some questions about what we're talking about would be marvellous as well. But the Gasly and Kvyat. Not so much so, because if Gasly doesn't perform, who will they bring in to replace? There's not that Verstappen factor. And I'm not saying that
they can't crawl back to Sainz now, can they? So
no, they're not going to put Albon in there.
What about Jev?
Oh yeah, of course. What about Jev?
Buemi.
It's like saying what about flipping Felipe Nasser? It's irrelevant. That's about the best example I could think of at the time. Fair enough to me. But,
oh dear.
But throwback Tuesday with Felipe Nasser, blimey. But sorry, back onto the point. It is a massive test for Gasly. He did well last year, and he did well against Brendan Hartley, who isn't the best driver ever. I think it's fair to say, but he was competitive. I think, honestly, I think that he was more competitive than people realised. I think that he was a solid driver, and I think he's very unlucky not to be in that team this year, particularly because Kvyat's there. That just sounds stupid. So we'll talk a little bit about Toro Rosso later, but it is a big year for Gasly, especially against Verstappen. Interesting thing I've got here in my notes. Did you see Helmut Marko said the other day that Verstappen is the number 1 driver and that Verstappen is straight ahead of Gasly? What a speech to put some confidence in your number 2 drive before the end of the season.
It fires him up though for Australia, doesn't it?
It does. I suppose it does. It's a bit cutthroat though, isn't it? It's not. Come on, Pierre, you've got time. Don't worry.
Well, Max is the golden boy at Red Bull, and that's why Ricciardo's out of there. Ultimately, in my opinion, The interesting thing is, though, it's sort of like the Vettel-Ricciardo situation, a few years ago. If Gasly comes in there and beats Verstappen, then all of a sudden you've got massive question marks over Verstappen.
Equally, though, I think Gasly's a very good driver, so I don't think it's the question marks over Verstappen for, if, for example, like when Ricciardo came to Red Bull, I wouldn't say he was that highly rated. He'd had a few years at Toro Rosso. Had he done anything magnificent? I don't know.
Not really. I think he finished 6th a couple of times, which for that team was pretty decent.
I feel like Gasly has the higher reputation. I don't know why, because he's only been there a season, but he's got the pedigree, he's got the reputation, so it's not so damning on Verstappen if he fights with him. Although I know what you're saying, if it's to such an extent that he's beating him every weekend, there's got to be some eyebrow raised. But to the original point, it's a massive test for Gasly. And to be honest, I don't think he'll offer that much. I think he'll be it will take him the season to get used to the car. Hence why I don't think he'll get a race win this year. I think if he does, that's brilliant, fantastic. But I don't see it. Although he can be very competitive, and I think that he will be number 2 to Verstappen. I can't see him beating Verstappen over a season. Although he'll certainly be useful. He won't be a mug.
No, I think he'll, as you say, he's going to get big points for that team. He'll get a few podiums, definitely. He might even sneak a victory if there's some goings on. A bit like Ricciardo 14, if you like, where he got 3 victories because, i.e., the Mercedes messed up those races. So, I think that sort of thing could happen. Obviously, again, it's a big year for Verstappen because he's got to really show that he's made that step in maturity that he made in the second half of last season. Keep progressing and people are going to start taking him seriously, or at least more seriously than they already are. So a massive year for both drivers, really. As we've said, it is for a number of drivers on the grid this year, and Red Bull in general, because, what happens if this Honda engine starts blowing up on them? Are they going to start, blaming Honda for everything like they were Renault?
They've got
who
to be
knows?
patient. I think they've got to learn from what happened with McLaren.
Yeah. But so, yeah, I think that's pretty much it for Red Bull, certainly what I want to say. So we'll move on to the next team in the championship, which I think we should rightly talk about Renault, because obviously they've invested heavily over the summer and over the winter, and
football.
and we're starting to get into the realms of where they said that they're wanting to be competing for podiums and wins. I think 2020 was the year they wanted to step up to championship, so we're still a year shy of that. But if they're going to want to be competing for championships in the future, they're going to have to be competing for race wins, or at the very least podiums in the next season, because obviously they haven't had a podium since they came back yet. I think the last time that Enstone-based team got a podium was 2014 Belgium with Grosjean, and that was a very weird weekend where they had the bailiffs in. So
it was 15 though.
Oh, was it 15? Okay.
I hate to falsify your information, but just for the facts of the podcast.
Yeah, okay, it was 15 apparently.
It was the season they had a really bad year, if you remember that. Like you said, he was knocking, and it was the season before Renault came in. It was a freak race. I remember. 4 years ago.
Yeah, 50. Yeah, for some reason I thought 15 was the year it was Magnussen and Palmer, but obviously that was 16. So yeah. Anyway, technicalities at the end of the day. But they've got a star driver in Daniel Ricciardo signing for the team, and obviously looking to prove himself. And I think it's a new challenge for him. And obviously they've got the established Mr. Consistency, Nico Hülkenberg, as well, who's freakishly finished in the top 10 of the championship most of his career and never really got a shot at any higher than the sort of 4th, 5th, 6th best teams. But they had an interesting testing, I would say. They looked quick on occasion, but then we don't know whether they're going for glory runs, so to speak.
But so was everyone. I think that.
Yeah.
It's something you can decide for everyone.
Yeah. With the Andrew Benson fuel-corrected times, which, you can take with a pinch of salt, he thinks that Renault are going to be 6th in the championship, Haas are going to be 4th, and Toro Rosso are going to be 5th. Now, we'll discuss that later, how likely we think that that's going to be. But Renault have showed progress over the last few years, and I think they've got their strongest driver lineup ever by a mile. So, what are your thoughts about Renault this year and how they're going to do?
I've had to eat my words a bit with both drivers. I think that last year I discredited Hülkenberg. I wouldn't say I don't like him. It's just one of the drivers in my grid I'm a bit impartial on and indifferent. I know you're a big fan of Hulk. And last year showed me against Sainz, this guy's good and he's consistent. That's the most important thing. And for a midfield team, you've got to be consistent. I think that it's important to anyone who's hoping that they're going to get podiums and wins. Scrap that. They're not. But I think they are close to that. Those spots are held by the top 3. there is a possibility that they could get a podium. It's like Racing Point or Force India. Perez gets incredibly lucky with podiums. Hulkenberg's the opposite, whereas that could change this year. I don't think Renault will be anywhere near the top 3, but I do feel they're going to be a little bit like Red Bull were a few years ago. The top guys are going to be too far ahead, but I think the guys behind them are probably going to be a little bit too far behind. So I think it's a big battle between the two. It's a big battle between the two drivers, and it'll be an interesting battle. But I think the point for me is that it's a win-win for Hulkenberg because he's expected to lose, but for Ricciardo, he has got a point to prove this year, and he's got a brilliant drive. He's got brilliant drive. His motivation's really good in my opinion. He's got a point to prove against Red Bull, and I think he could get a few star results. But so could Hulkenberg. It's the same thing, but with Renault only hosting themselves and not sponsoring, but what's the word? So supplying, that's the one. Supplying McLaren and themselves this year. I do worry that performance might be lacking a bit because I think McLaren aren't exactly the best benchmark, but we'll go into that a bit later. But I think it's one of the most underrated driver lineups on the grid, as is the Haas lineup. But I'll be interested to see who's going to win that battle. I think you could make a good case for either driver winning that battle, couldn't you? You generally could.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it will come down to reliability at the end of the day. I think a retirement here or there for each of the drivers could seriously affect their championship standing with each other, because I do genuinely think it is one of the more evenly matched lineups on the grid. Obviously, we'll find out on Saturday whether that's true or not. But Hulkenberg has dragged massive performances out of Force India and Sauber. Back in 2013, almost won a race for Force India in 2012 before crashing into Hamilton in his last McLaren race. But it's. Oh, well done on your acca, Toby. I think it's as you say, it's a win-win for Hulkenberg, because Renault aren't going to be interested in getting rid of him anytime soon, I don't think. There's not really many better options out there for them. So as long as he's close to Ricciardo, he's going to be fine. And if he beats Ricciardo, he's getting himself in the conversation for a top seat again, in my opinion. Particularly Mercedes, maybe.
The opportunity's not there, I don't think.
I think it depends. If what you say is true about Vettel, being his last year in the sport, Bottas probably leaving Mercedes, then you think Ocon to Mercedes, and then who goes to Ferrari? Ricciardo's not going to go there, and unless Max goes there. But I don't see that happening. But They voted against May's Brexit deal. There you go, Rob. I mean, if you were here at the start of the podcast, you would have heard the breaking news from us. We got live feed from Westminster and all that. But I think as you say, Renault are going to be in no man's land this year. Not close enough to the top teams. They might scrape a podium here and there. Places like Baku or Mexico or something like that. Crazy things tend to happen there. But yeah, they'll be ahead of the other midfield guys. So I think we can sort of rattle through a few teams now. There's not much to say about the next lot, but maybe this team in particular, McLaren. I guess we can dedicate a little bit to them. You're second in the championship last year. But obviously the big loss of Fernando Alonso, just like Ferrari, have had big changes over the winter. But when have they not? Since Martin Whitmarsh left in 2013, I think, 14 maybe. And McLaren at second year with the Renault. They're sort of going under the radar. Obviously, nobody's expecting anything from McLaren this year. So could that perhaps be of benefit to them this year, that people aren't looking at them and saying, oh, they said they were going to be a podium winning team by Australia last year. Is it going to help them that absolutely nobody's talking about McLaren in that manner this year? We all expect that they're going to be pretty bad.
I'll be blunt here. No.
No?
I think that McLaren, and I'm going to be very harsh here, McLaren are the biggest laughing stock on the grid. They are. I'm sorry. I think that you can kind of accept Williams falling to the bottom. McLaren, with the resource they've got, with the money they've got, with the staff they've got, it's just completely unacceptable. And without Alonso there last year, I think that Alonso massively flattered the performance of that car. And I can't see what gains they've made this side of the season. I think Sainz can make a performance similar to Alonso, but Norris is an unknown. I think they can improve, and I'm not really expecting much from Norris. It's a big year for Sainz, though, because once again, and I think this is why the season's so anticipating and exciting, because there's so many drivers with big years, there's so many drivers that could have breakthroughs, make or break seasons for them, and that's what it is for Carlos Sainz and for Lando Norris equally here.
Mm-hmm.
But personally, I can't see McLaren improving. That's not because I said they were going to finish second last year. I just want to make sure that I'm a little bit more conservative this year. But honestly, with the level of I think that there's a massive level of competition in the midfield, which disputes what some people were saying earlier in the comments on YouTube about there's no F1 anymore, there's no competition. I think that the competition between 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, possibly even 9th in the Constructors is huge. Any team could finish there because it's so close. But I can't see McLaren competing too well in that. And that will be their big downfall. And they haven't got the experience that... Let's run through the teams. Renault have got in both drivers. Haas have got in both drivers. Racing Point have got in Perez. Sauber have got in... Alfa Romeo have got in Raikkonen. And equally, Toro Rosso have got in Kvyat. So you could say McLaren have got Sainz for the experience, but will that be counterbalanced by Norris? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And has Sainz got what it takes to lead a team? You know, he's only been in Formula One 4 years. It's a big, big task to take on. You could say that, well, Verstappen's doing the same, but Verstappen's in a ready-built team. McLaren are a team that needs to be guided. It needs drivers with good advice, good feedback, and can the drivers provide that? I don't know, because honestly, I think that Alonso was effectively running that team last year.
Yeah. And I mean, he's still popping his head up in this year's team. That is how big a presence he is, you know, that he's there. Is he their reserve driver this year?
Kind of. I put it this way: if they start doing well, I'm sure he'll be knocking on the gazelle saying, "Can I just drive in the Spanish Grand Prix? Can I just drive in this one?"
Yeah. Monaco.
Yeah.
No, if McLaren come out and win the first race of the season, you can bet your bottom dollar that Alonso will be in by Bahrain. You know, he will be in, and Norris will have to wait another year.
I mean, I'm sorry, I know it's horrible to say for Norris, but why not?
Yeah, you know, we'd all love to see Alonso in a race-winning car again. You know, what's going to be interesting is if Norris wins the first race, and then what do they do?
If Norris wins the first race, there isn't something dodgy in me orange squashes.
Yeah.
What did you do?
Anyway.
Sorry, no, we can't just overlook that fact. That's worse than me saying McLaren had finished second last year. Lando Norris winning the first race. Go home, honestly.
Before we get too hyped about McLaren, and
he's going to win as well, isn't he? Now,
yeah. I was just posing the question that, like, what do you do with Alonso then? You know, you can't exactly get rid of Sainz instead. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Maybe you have a sort of race rotation system where Sainz and Norris swap every race, and I know not Toro, so HRT had that back in 2010 or something, like the back half of the season they swapped drivers every race.
We not
it was
get
stupid.
Into that?
But anyway, no, I don't either. But unless the top 10 retire or something, or get disqualified, you never know. Anyway, McLaren, big year for them really, you know, but again, because they're going under the radar, people are expecting them to do crap. So if they're
get it right this year, funnily enough.
If they're the second worst team on the grid again, nobody's going to really say anything. Rob was speculating that maybe McLaren are saving the money and working on the 2021 car, a bit like Mercedes 2014, but nobody seems to have done it since. Do you know what I mean? But anyway, so we'll get on to our predictions about McLaren later, but we'll move on before we start speculating they'll win the championship. So I guess we can sort of group the next three or four together, really, with Toro Rosso, Haas, Alpha and Racing Point.
Going to be tricky, but we can do it.
Yeah, I'd just suggest that because I think they're very, very close. From testing and from previous years, the midfield is going to be tight. Haas have probably got the best team out of those four. If you look on the face of it, with Magnussen, Grosjean continuing for a third consecutive year, and Grosjean having a really cracking end of the season, really.
Yeah.
So they've had new investment from this Rich Energy or whatever. I don't really understand what all that's about, but
Lotus V2.
Yeah. They're obviously buying a lot of their parts from Ferrari, as they always do. And they'll be a solid, dependable car next season, I would imagine. And what do you think about the driver pairing of Magnussen and Grosjean? And do you think they can progress up to their target of 4th this season, or do you think they're just going to be 5th to 8th, that sort of region?
I said this last year, and I'll continue this. This is probably going to be the only fact that remains from last year. Haas have got a very, very, very underrated, undermined driver lineup. They've got two. Now, I'm not going to say championship-winning drivers because I'll get shot for that.
In the right car, they would be 100%. I think.
Thank you. I haven't said something stupid there.
If Grosjean was driving a Mercedes, he'd win the championship. I believe that.
Two solid drivers, then. Two solid drivers that can outdrive the car. If they would have got the 22 points or the 20 points in Australia last year, I know we don't like looking at hindsight, but they could have finished 4th in the constructors. That would have been a big boost for them. And if they can start well again this year, Magnussen has. I'm not going to use the, but I'll put the word in there, and you can figure it out. He has got big, bowling. Yeah, okay.
Big testicles.
He will. Thank you. And he will go for anything. He is mad, but he isn't that mad that he'll cause too many accidents. He's not as mad as Grosjean was in 2012. He is. Honestly, he's just fantastic. I love watching Magnussen. I think he doesn't care. And I think that's just so brilliant. But he doesn't go mad to cause a crash. Not for him, anyway. He'll take someone else out, but oh well. But they've got two very feisty drivers, two drivers that can make a lot of good results given the car, given the resource, and given a good position. So I think they're a little bit undermined. And it's going to be a big year for both of them. Grosjean needs to perform. I think, like last year. But I've said here in my notes, and that's what I'm going to finish on. Haas are an unknown quantity, and they could perform well. I don't expect them to be 8th or 7th. I think they will be in that 6th, 5th, or even 4th.
Yeah, I think it will come down to reliability in that midfield and who's going to finish where. And I think Haas have been very reliable over the last few years. I mean, they were very unlucky not to finish 4th and 5th. At Australia last year, if you remember, they both had pit stop failures. So the tyre came off, I think, after the pit stops for both drivers while they were running 4th and 5th. And they could have had a lot more points last season and maybe even done better than the 6th that I think they finished in. Or was it 7th? Or was it 5th? Might have been 5th. No, Force India were 5th, weren't they?
No, it was 5th because they.
Force India obviously lost all their points, didn't they? So yeah. Anyway, so Haas, again, we're looking at a fairly dependable driver lineup, and I think they'll be fine again this season. Certainly ahead of Williams, but we'll get onto that in a minute. So Alpha, obviously, they've welcomed your hero, Mr. Kimi Räikkönen, to the team, and presumably they've got fresh investment, and now they've fully switched over to Alfa Romeo, another team that I think are getting parts from Ferrari. I'm not entirely sure the situation on that, but they're certainly the Ferrari B team, so to speak. So how do you feel like Alfa Romeo will do in technically their first year in the sport?
They're a dark horse. They are a massive dark horse. I agree with what the people have said in the comments, Rob Ponter and Old Man Sudor. They are a big dark horse. All right. I think I've got enough. They're a dark horse. I think you can understand that by now. Kimi Räikkönen in that car is going to be like an Alonso and a McLaren, but a McLaren that's better than a McLaren. So make up your mind there. I think that Sauber was a really good car last year. That's why I kind of undermine Leclerc's achievements a little bit, because Ericsson did it and so did Leclerc, and I think that Kimi can do even better. So honestly, I think that Kimi can perform some awesome, pull some awesome stuff out of the bag. He's got no pressure, he's going down to enjoy himself now. It's not like Ferrari with all the inter-team politics or even Benny saying, right, make sure Vettel beats you, or we'll send Vettel out first in quali, all that stupid crap. We've gone past 9 o'clock now, we're all right.
Yeah, but don't worry about it.
Um,
This will be an extended podcast, and I don't expect it to be the norm, but we're not going to worry about time tonight. So
yeah, as long as we're not going until midnight. I do need to get up in the morning. Yeah. But I think Kimi's going to be really interesting, and I think he could really dice it with the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th in the championship, and that'll be really interesting. But don't discount Giovinazzi.
Yeah, I think Giovinazzi's fast, but I think he's. I think it's going to be a tough step up for him as Toby's obviously took a little break for whatever reason. But, as he said, I think Alpha are a potential dark horse this year. They looked very, very strong in testing, and people really fancy them. Allegedly, their parts on the second week, they had some sort of update in the second week, and that didn't quite work the way they were expecting, but nobody knows really from testing what's going to happen. But I'll discuss this with Toby in a minute, but the thing about Raikkonen that worries me is that during his time at Ferrari, the second spell, I'm not sure we've seen a lot of the racer in Kimi. Wheel-to-wheel action and him being good wheel-to-wheel. So Toby's just come back. I'm just talking about Kimi Raikkonen, and a slight concern I have for him this season is that during his second spell at Ferrari, we've not really seen him do much wheel-to-wheel racing or really good wheel-to-wheel racing is what I'm saying, and being in the midfield he's going to have to do a lot of that, and I wonder whether that's going to hold him back a little bit. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
It's interesting, isn't it? I don't know. I really don't know. Interesting thought. Well, I don't know what you think. Do you think that?
I think perhaps, if he was in clean air, I think he would finish 7th in the championship probably. But I worry that his racecraft isn't as good as it used to be, and I think that'll cost Sauber points or Alpha, I should say.
Alpha, yeah.
But anyway, see you later, old lady players. Thank you very much for coming along. Very good to see you.
Any thoughts about Giovinazzi?
I think he's fast. I think I was saying it as you were leaving the room, but I think he's fast. But in a very short time in F1, he's a bit raw at the moment, and I think being alongside Kimi is only going to be a benefit for him, because people are expecting him to get trounced this season, and he's going to have time to develop. If he'd went in there with Ericsson, it's a different story. Do you know what I mean? If he gets beat by Raikkonen, nobody's going to raise their eyebrows. So,
yeah.
I think he can't crash in Australia, because that'll be his 4 Grand Prix he's crashed in. So, he's turned into the UGE day of F1. But anyway, so Alfa Romeo, we both think might be a bit of a dark horse this year. We'll get on to predictions later, obviously, but the other part of the midfield is consisted of Toro Rosso and Racing Point, so I'll let you talk about which team you want to talk about next.
We'll talk about Racing Point first.
Yeah.
There's a lot of politics that are about Racing Point. Now, you might or you might not know that Lance Stroll's father, is part of a consortium that have bought Force India, hence why the team's called Racing Point now. Immediately that caused a lot of problems. Like at Williams, his son is only there because his dad has bought the team.
Mm-hmm.
Really, and I've put it down in my notes, so I'm going to say it. Perez is expected to spank Stroll. To be blunt about it.
I beg your pardon.
Perez is expected to beat Stroll very strongly.
Yeah.
Although Stroll could be favoured by the team owners. That's what I worry about a bit. I don't like Perez, so I couldn't really care less. But Stroll could be favoured, and Perez should beat him by quite a bit. But it's a big season for Stroll. If he can perform, then I'll take all that back. I'll take all that back. But so far, I haven't seen any real evidence that he can be any good. Whereas Perez is a good driver. We've had a few interesting things in the comments about how Racing Point could be a bit bad because there's issues behind the scenes. Interesting there.
Inside information.
There. I know. But I think there are 3 teams that are worse than them, so that will inform where they're going to finish in the Constructors. But
yeah,
I think that, well, Williams aren't going to finish above them. I don't think Toro Rosso are.
Unless Williams have got some sort of incredible development lined up.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
That's a big hint. We're not talking about them in the midfield battle. That's all I'll say. How much do you think Perez will beat Stroll this year? How much of a margin? Or am I just being too harsh? Do you think they'll be closer?
I don't think you're being too harsh. I think when Williams had a decent car, Stroll didn't step up. With Massa in Massa's last year. Massa very very much outperformed Stroll that year. But that's Felipe Massa. This is Sergio Perez. Now, Perez has obviously had Button as a teammate. He's had Hulkenberg as a teammate. Who else has he teammated? Who's been a Ocon the last couple of years?
Kobayashi as well.
Yeah, Kobayashi. And Perez is sort of shown that he can, put in a very good level, very consistent. He'll score a lot of points if the car's there. He'll even sneak some podiums somehow. But Stroll, hasn't really proved himself. He's looked well off the pace to some drivers. I mean, Sirotkin last year, it was a fairly even battle between them, I guess. But against Massa, he was a second off, in some qualifying sessions. And that's, for me, I think Perez is going to beat him quite heavily, because I think that Racing Point car won't be good enough to beat where it's been the last few years, where it's sometimes been battling for 6th and 7th. I think they're more likely to be fighting for 9th and 10th, and I think 9 times out of 10 Perez is going to get the 9th place, and therefore he's going to beat him quite harshly in the championship, I would imagine. But we could be taking all this back in 9 months' time or whatever, but that's just where it is at the moment. What I find interesting is that you can't even use the excuse that Lance Stroll is a pay driver anymore. He is literally just the son of the team owner, isn't he? So, at least with Williams you could say, well, he was paying the bills, but anyway, I think Racing Point will struggle this year. And I see them actually being at the back of this midfield battle. Certainly at the start of the season, they always develop well, though. So, the best pound-for-pound team in F1. We'll see how they get on throughout the year. But I think at the start, they're going to struggle to get out of Q1, I think. So, Toro Rosso, last of the midfield teams. Obviously, all changed there, or at least they're welcoming back Danny Kvyat for his something like 4th spell at the team.
Stupid.
And Albon as well has come in as theoretically the second driver, I guess. But he actually has to have green lights at the back of his car because he hasn't had enough miles in an F1 car to have the normal red light or whatever. So that's interesting in itself. And Toro Rosso obviously always seem to start the season with a decent car and then don't develop it for the rest of the year. So, they had a few quick times in pre-season testing, admittedly.
The top 2 of the days, I think, didn't they?
Yeah, and Andrew Benson's critically acclaimed fuel corrected times has them 4th on the table, 0.2 ahead of 7th place Red Bull. Just putting it out there, but Yeah, it's what do you think about their season? Do you think Kvyat going back there will bring anything better than the 2017 season, or do you think?
Just seems so contradictory that they got rid of Hartley and brought Kvyat in. I don't really understand that.
Well, Hartley will be back next season, don't worry.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, sounds about right. There's not really much expected of either driver, to be honest. I don't think Kvyat's been built up much on his return, actually, which is a bit of a surprise. But not much of expected of Albon. I think out of all the 10 teams, they've been the least talked about, and I think there's a reason for that.
Mm-hmm.
They're not gonna challenge, but they're not gonna be right at the back. They're gonna be in the mix, but I don't think they're gonna do anything special. There's not much expected of Albon. He crashed on the first lap that he went out in pre-season test. That's always the best way to start your career, isn't it? But I don't really have much faith in Albon. I think that Kvyat will be satisfactory. Might pull off a few good performances here and there, but honestly, I can't really see them scoring many points, and I think they'll both be quite low down the championship. And for Albon, it's going to be a decent first year, but he won't be pulling any strings massively. I know we say that, well, Red Bull are going to be up there, so how will Toro Rosso? And I just feel like the lineup doesn't give much inspiration for me.
Rob's talking about Boom 1-1. Sorry, Toby. Is that your...
Well, Aberdeen are 2-0 up against Rangers, so...
Okay.
It's all falling apart now.
Right, anyway, not much more to say about Toro Rosso, I don't think. I think, as you say, it could be a very 2011-2012-esque season, I think, where they struggle to pick up points and, they might finish 9th because of that, but we'll talk about that in a bit. So Williams, turned up late to testing. They've got a new driver lineup this year as well. Paddy Lowe's already out of the team. Before day one, which I think is a bit harsh. It's all his fault. But they obviously got rid of Rob Smedley as well at the end of last season, and they've kind of went all change over the winter. They've got a new livery, like it all over it, and they've got Robert Kubica back at the team, which I know you've got your own opinions about, and GP2 champion. George Russell, or F2 champion, I should say. So, a bit of pedigree there, and they're still kind of Mercedes B team, really. If Russell does really well, there's a route to Mercedes there. But we're expecting they're going to be the Caterhams of this year, unfortunately. They turned up 2 days late, and even when they did turn up, they were slow, and it's quite sad to see, I have to say. But it sort of tops up a big decline of them since 2014, really. Where they had a decent car. 2015, they still had a decent car, and then since then they've sort of dropped off the face of the earth, really. So, what are your thoughts on Williams? I know you're sporting their attire there, but. Do you think we'll be seeing those colours on the podium this season?
Christ. It's about as good as your Norris to win prediction, that is. I think it's just really depressing talking about Williams. I think that they've declined. They haven't got the money. They haven't got the budget. I think their driver lineup is incredibly uninspiring. I think that Kubica going back, well,
apparently he's only 20% ready for the season, so...
Exactly. I mean, he could make a complete mockery of himself, and Sorokin wasn't bad. I don't know why Sorokin wasn't retained, but nevertheless, he's the...
I think Kubica gets them a bit of PR, Sorokin wouldn't. Do you know what I mean?
Some needed PR, definitely. Christ, they need some PR at the moment. Russell's an interesting one, I think Russell could be good. I heard Claire Williams talking about Russell, that he hasn't put a foot wrong. He gives good feedback, which is what a team like that needs, so that's positive for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a bit of a tricky one for both drivers. I think for Russell, if he beats Kubica, it's, look at him, he's beat Kubica, he's got plenty of experience. But then it will also be, well, Kubica's hampered. Whereas if Kubica beats Russell, it's all welcome back, Kubica. There's no loss for Kubica, really, because even if he doesn't lose, even if he does lose, it's, well, he's hampered because of his conditions. So that's what I don't like about that move particularly. But I've got a bit of faith in Russell, but it's a little bit like McLaren. And with Bottas, I don't think, but I fear that they'll be late to the party, if you like. They were late to testing. Paddy Lowe's been sacked. It really doesn't look good for him, and I can't see a Brawn story. Put it that way. I don't think it's going to quite go that way. And they've lost a lot of sponsors. The they've bought in Rocket, which I'm not really sure about. I think that, and this sounds daft, I was discussing this the other day, I think that ever since Frank has kind of left as a team principal, I think they've massively been a detriment, because I honestly think, I know it sounds crazy, but Frank Williams had the charm back in the day to get sponsors like Rothmans, like Martini in the last few years. Claire Williams hasn't got that, and I just wonder whether that might be one of the reasons why the team's fall back. You can't blame it.
I think they've also lost like massive names like Pat Simmons and Patrick Head. I think that were both big names at Williams. And they've sort of moved on now, and
they've lost Massa and Bottas. Compare this lineup to, and even last year,
Maldonado,
Bottas to Stroll. Well, exactly. To Stroll and Sorokin, and Russell took a bit. So I know we were on about patronising Bottas earlier, but Bottas and Massa have both gone on to have experience in Mercedes and Ferraris, and even a good Williams at the time. Mm-hmm. Russell, Stroll, Sorokin, and Kubica. What have they got between them?
Yeah,
nothing much, have they?
Me and Kubica, when he in his first career was very
good. But it's like Alonso's story, isn't it? There's only so much that he can do in a bad car.
It's tough because nobody's come from.
It was tough.
Nobody's come from nearly 9 years out of the sport, and certainly at Kubica's level. I know Cartha Keane technically did it, but and De La Rosa will probably be in F1 next season. Luca Badoa, I'm not really setting a good trend here. I think, as you say, it's a win-win for Kubica. He's back in the sport that he loves and that he's been trying to get in for a number of years now. And, for Russell, it's a decent benchmark. If Russell beats Kubica, then people are, Kubica's still a rated driver in the paddock, I think. So, it gets his stock high a little bit. If he gets beat by him, it's, perhaps a little bit of a question mark over him. But he's got a pedigree from lower formulas. But as you say, it is just sad to see Williams where they are. But I genuinely don't see them ever competing for championships again.
Unless they sold to somebody else, unless there's a consortium that comes in and it's not Williams anymore. I think you're right. I think that pretty much sums up Williams. It's a real shame. You could say, Rob, they could need to get a Kimi in there, but they just haven't got the finance. Why would Kimi go there? Why would anybody go there? It's just such an unattractive prospect unless you've got serious money and you can kind of buy the team, which...
You can't say that Williams are an attractive, historical team anymore. It's like McLaren in many ways. McLaren aren't title contenders anymore. That they're not as attractive to join. Even Red Bull, to a certain extent, their driver program isn't as attractive because they haven't had success for 5 years in F1.
Plus, their driver program served its purpose.
Yeah,
they've found the names that they need, so that's served its purpose now.
But if Verstappen leaves Red Bull, then where does that leave them? Cool. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like Vettel did. But it's going to be a tough season for Williams, I think. And I think they're probably better off just thinking about 2020 now. There's not really a lot of point in them throwing a load of money into this car, because even if they find a second on the car, the other teams around them are going to find half a second to stay ahead of them. So it's going to be tough for them, I think. And I think that's reflected in our predictions, which we will go on to now. I think we've looked at the teams as a whole, and I think we're both looking forward to telling you guys our predictions. So let's start with the Constructors' Championship. I think that's a less interesting championship. So I think we're both in agreement that 10th place will be
Ferrari, obviously.
Yeah.
Williams,
yeah. Williams are well off the pace, we think, and they're going to struggle to score any points this year, I would suggest. So, yeah. Toro Rosso, is my ninth team. I was going to say ninth place, but Toro Rosso is my ninth place team, and I think that's because of their driver lineup. I don't think it's as strong as the teams around them, and as I said when we were talking about the team, I think they're going to struggle to pick up big points at least, and I think the other teams will. Yeah, so you agree? What about 8th place? Who have you got in 8th?
I've got McLaren in 8th place. I said that shouldn't expect too much from McLaren, and I think that the other competition, Renault, Racing Point, Haas and Romeo, are too strong fundamentally. They might come up with a good car, but I think the competition's too strong.
I've got Racing Point at 8th. I think as OMS said before, I think Racing Point are in a bad situation at the moment, and they've still got the staff there that led that team to multiple 4th places. Would have been another one last year if they hadn't had all their points removed. But I also think they're going to have one driver bringing in most of the points, and that's going to make them suffer against.
Would you increase that position if Ocon was still there?
Probably, yeah. Probably.
So is it a direct Stroll thing?
Well, yes. I think Ocon can probably drag a bit more out of it, and therefore more points. It's difficult though, because I think Alfa and McLaren and Haas have got much better driver lineups than Racing Point, and that's ultimately why I think they'll be ahead. But I also think they're behind pace wise as well. 7th then.
No, I've made a light change to that. I think Racing Point will be 7th. I think that I'd got Haas there originally, but I think I think that Haas have got the better lineup, and for reasons you said earlier about Racing Point, but I think they will be at McLaren. Perez has got the potential to get more big points, and that's what that will come down to.
Yeah. What have you gone with? I've gone for Alfa. I think my concerns about Kimi sort of hold true there. I think I'm not entirely sure Kimi will be able to drag massive performances out of that Sauber week in, week out. I think he'll be consistent. I don't think he's going to get podiums with Alfa, unless they're a really good team, which they may well be. And I think Gio's going to take a little while to settle down. I don't think he's going to be a Gutierrez, but I think he's going to take a while to settle down. I think again, Haas have got a very strong lineup. And I think McLaren might just have a bit more pace across the season, not necessarily in Australia, but over the year I think McLaren will probably develop the car. They're bound to 1 year, aren't they?
Yeah.
6th?
Haas.
Okay.
I made a change, and as I said, I don't think that it'd be fair to put them all the way down in 7th. I think that they'll extract performance, but it's like the same old case. There's 2 teams that are better than them, I think, and Grosjean and Magnussen are the type that are consistent but could well make mistakes, and it all comes down to consistency in this formula.
I think McLaren in 6th. So I think we'll see an improvement from them this year. They certainly look a little bit ahead of where they were at the end of last year, which isn't hard, but I think Sainz is good. Obviously Norris is an unknown, but I think he's one that'll get stronger throughout the season, a bit like Gio. And I think Sainz has the ability to get some really decent points out of that car. So I've got McLaren 6th this year, but the midfield is so close. Anywhere that I've got 5th to 9th really could be interchangeable, I think, depending on reliability and stuff like that. But yeah, I've gone McLaren in 6th for now. 5th?
Okay. 5th. For me, Alfa Romeo. I know you put Alfa Romeo a bit further down. I don't particularly agree with what you've said about Raikkonen. I think he will be what Alonso has been to McLaren in the last few years. I think he'll outdrive the car. I think he'll get a few good performances, and if the car is good enough, it'll be a podium. I think for Kimi, that's my bold prediction of the evening, number 3.
Okay.
But at the same time, that could be so interchangeable. I think it's not much of a bold prediction, but it all depends on how good the car is. And if it's not as good as I think it will be, they will be further down. I'm guessing you've gone with Haas there?
Yeah, I've gone Haas because I just think consistency more than anything. I don't think Grosjean and Magnussen will get podiums, but I think if there's a sixth on offer, they're going to get it more times than not. And I think they're more likely to double score in the top 10 than the other teams around them. So that's why I've got them in 5th. They looked okay in testing again. But we won't know until Saturday. They usually start out really well, Haas, and struggle to develop. So that's another thing that could be interchangeable there. But going into the top 4, I've gone Renault for 4th place, which we touched on before. They're going to be in no man's land this year, in my opinion. A little bit off Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes, but they're going to be quite a bit ahead of the likes of Haas and McLaren, in my opinion, this season anyway. So you've went Renault as well for 4th? Yeah. Top 3 then?
Now this is going to be an interesting one. I think we'll just go 1, 2, 3 and just get it over with. Now for me, honestly, you could put these teams in any order and you could make a good argument. But I'm going to stick to my gut. Ferrari 1, Red Bull 2, Mercedes 3. It seems bonkers that Mercedes are 3, but that's what I went with. But I think you could honestly put these teams in any order and you could make a case. I'm guessing you've gone Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, obviously in the opposite way.
Yeah, so I still think Mercedes will win the championship, just because I think a certain somebody will get a lot more points over. Bottas will get a lot more points over Leclerc than
interesting
than Vettel will over Hamilton. That's what I think. But anyway. And then obviously Ferrari 2nd. I think again they'll start the season well, but as we've seen the development race, that they'll lose. And Red Bull will be 3rd, simply because I think there'll be a few teething issues with the Honda. I think towards the end of the season they will again be very, very fast. So we'll see how they do. But yeah, Toby's gone for a bit. So, no, he's back. So yeah, I guess going on to the drivers then. I think do these in batches of 5 up until probably the top 8. So my bottom 5, 20th I've got George Russell. 19th I've got Kubica. 18th I've got Stroll. 17th Gio and 16th Albon.
Interesting. Reverse in terms of Williams, Kubica and Russell. I don't think we need to justify those particularly. It's just down to personal preference. Albon 18th. Don't think Toro Rosso will offer much. Norris 17th. Again, I think it'd be a disappointing season. It would take a long time for him to get used to it as well. And Kvyat in 16th.
15th to 11th then. I've got Kvyat 15th. I've then got Perez 14th, which is quite low for Perez, but that's where I think Force India are. I'm just going to call them that. Because Racing Point is ridiculous. 13th I've got Norris. I think he'll improve as the season goes on, and I think towards the end of the year he's going to score regular points, but again I think it's going to take him a long time to do that. Now I've got Magnussen and Grosjean 12th and 11th there.
Stroll for me in 15th. I don't think he's going to do anything. Sainz in 14th. That could increase the McLaren's good. Grosjean 13th. Giovinazzi 12th. I might move him down a few, but considering where I've put Kimi, I've got to put Gio up there. And Magnussen 11th. I think that, touching on Perez, he will finish 10th. I think that he will just get those few good results. He's lucky in that way, and I think that will mean he eclipses the drivers behind him.
Top 10, I've got Kimi Räikkönen 10th and Sainz 9th. What about you?
So I've got Perez 10th and I've got Ricciardo in 9th.
Okay, so that's very interesting. We'll talk maybe in more detail about the top 8 drivers. Because, I think this is pretty nailed on to be the top 8. In any given order. So 7th and 8th, I've got Hülkenberg and Ricciardo. I think Hülkenberg will shade Ricciardo this season simply because he's had longer at the team. I think Hülkenberg will start out better, but Ricciardo might come back at him towards the end of the year. And I genuinely think it's a toss of the coin of reliability between them two, who's going to come out on top.
Yeah, I think, as you say, Hülkenberg will beat Ricciardo. And Kimi will finish 7th. That's down to personal bias because I love Kimi, but I think given the car, he could do it. And
He could do it, yeah. It all depends how good that Alpha is.
yeah, but for me, Kimi will be 7th if that car's good. But if not, he'll be 9th. He'll be either side of the Renaults, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think him and Sainz is going to be a really interesting battle this season because I think they're the standout drivers of the midfield. So I think Sainz will win it just because of reasons I've said before. But yeah. Anyway, into the top 6 then. So 6th place, I've got Pierre Gasly, and that is simply because I think, as you've said before, I think he's going to take a little while to adjust to it, and I think the other 5 will just be ahead of him by the end of the season, and but he'll be easily 6th, I think.
Yeah, agreed. Snap there. Yeah, I think that it's going to take him a little while to adjust, and the pressure of Verstappen, I think, will get to him a little bit. But he'll have the odd good performance, but not having a race win will definitely be of detriment to him.
Mm-hmm. 5th place, I've got Valtteri Bottas. I think no surprises there, particularly, especially if the top 3 are close. I think if Mercedes are in another league, he might finish 3rd, but
that'll just be elevated or inflated on how good the car is.
Yeah.
It's not really on his home performance. We're assessing his performance, aren't we? But many things.
I just think he's not that close to Hamilton, and if it is as close as we think, then that's going to make a bigger difference. So he's going to finish 5th, in my opinion. 4th, I've got Leclerc. I think Vettel will beat him over the season. I think, again, Leclerc will take a little bit of getting used to the car, and then, as the season goes on, he may well go and beat Vettel, but I think 4th is my prediction. He'll definitely win races, I think, but...
Who have you got in 3rd?
Verstappen.
So you think Vettel will either be 1st or 2nd? Of course, we can't disclose that till the point. That's interesting. I've got Leclerc 3rd, Vettel 4th. I just feel something's going to happen that Leclerc will beat him and it'll all go to riot. But honestly, I think that could be reversed. I don't see any of them being in the top 2 because I think that Ferrari, once again, will just disappoint.
The thing is, I think Vettel will win a few races at the start of the season, and that's what will inflate his position a bit.
Yeah.
Verstappen will probably crash at Monaco again. Verstappen's 3rd for me, simply because I think Red Bull won't quite be at championship winning level yet, which I know that you think they will be, but I think Verstappen, will finish a good 3rd, probably not that far behind the championship winner, but he'll definitely win races again this year, but yeah, maybe next year for him.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Top 2 then. Who have you got to win the championship?
Max.
Why?
That's my bold prediction for the evening. I just feel that it's Red Bull's time. It's Red Bull's year, and I think that the Honda engine will be really good for him. Of course, it's more what goes on in my mad head than my thinking. I think Verstappen will finish 2nd if he doesn't win the championship. I feel that Hamilton's most direct rival is Verstappen this year rather than Vettel. I think Vettel will become too focused on his battle with Leclerc.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
and I think that will upset him sometimes. And I think that although it's not going to get political, I think it could get interesting to say the least. And
yeah. It's a good point. I think Leclerc will take more points off Vettel than Gasly will off Verstappen, and that could...
That helps Verstappen, doesn't it? Although, as you say, he's a bit erratic, he might not finish the odd race, but then the same could happen to Lewis. You just don't know what could happen in the season.
It's tough, yeah. I've got Hamilton to win. I think he was on another level last season, and providing Mercedes give him at least a race-winning car, I think Hamilton will just about win it this year. I think Vettel has got a point to prove, so I think he will win a few, certainly in the early stage of the season. And as I said, I think Verstappen will win Grand Prix, and I think it might actually be a bit closer this year. We might get to USA this year before the championships won, because USA and Mexico have swapped. position in the calendar. That's the only change for the calendar this year that they've swapped around. But yeah, I think Hamilton first, Vettel second, just Verstappen third, simply because of reliability / drive error with Verstappen. But yeah, there you have it then. Our 2019 F1 Drivers and Constructors Championship predictions. And as we've said, it's going to be a very exciting season. And talking about it today, I think there's a lot of interesting battles in there. We're going to have an accumulator on for all the teammate battles. And, we might win some money out of it. I think it only ends up being, something like 160? Yeah, 160s. So, yeah. It's not that much, really. Considering you can put 2 horses in and get better odds than that at Cheltenham this week. But anyway, obviously the Australian Grand Prix starts properly on Saturday. We all know it does, even though Toby will be up in the early hours watching FP, I'm sure. Yeah, I think it's 6 a.m. in the UK. That qualifying actually starts, not build-ups or anything, and then it'll be 7 a.m. for the race. It's always an hour later. You are
5:10 the race.
What in the? Is it an hour before this year? Okay.
Yeah, 5:10. So that'll be an interesting get up at 3:30. But
I thought last year it was an hour later, but I'll end up watching the highlights.
But it's definitely 5:10 this year. But
right.
I think we're planning to do, if we can, a review of the Grand Prix. So make sure to stick around for that as well. Obviously, if you're on Spotify or any streaming platform, the podcast will be up ASAP, as will this one. And I hope that you guys over there enjoy it. But if you're not watching live, come along. Follow us on Twitter, Captain Goodspeed or Toby Jones 22. We'll tweet whenever we're doing a podcast. I definitely recommend coming along live, having a listen, having a watch.
Having a debate with other people in the chat. We've had plenty of debate in the chat tonight. So
and I think that I think to round up tonight, it's going to be a very interesting season, and it all starts on Friday.
It does all start on Friday. So, as Toby alluded to there will be a Tuesday Night Live extra, which is a new thing for this season of the podcast, where, we're not just going to do it on a Tuesday this year. And it will be a race review of the Australian Grand Prix. It'll probably be Monday night or Monday afternoon, something like that. It's not necessarily going to be on the night time, but we will be reviewing that first Grand Prix and obviously discussing Lando Norris's monumental victory and what that means for McLaren in the rest of the season. But we really do hope that you have enjoyed this podcast, and if you're on YouTube, then make sure you leave a like on it and let us know down in the comments if you're watching it as a post stream video what you think and what your driver predictions are for the season and stuff like that. So I've really enjoyed that. We will be doing this regularly, not next Tuesday, but we'll be back in the near future at least.
We'll be doing this regularly, but not next week.
Yeah, not weekly, but regularly. I think is what our plan is with the podcast now. We don't want to talk about something for the sake of it. We want to talk about stuff we're passionate about, and that is exactly what. But as usual,
get involved in the ordinary channels and you'll know when there's a podcast.
Yeah,
Plus
exactly.
The fact we will put the live event on a few hours before, just so you guys know that the live event is on. But of course, we've said it before, we'll say it again. If you can't make the live event, there's the option to watch it on YouTube later. There's the option to go on Spotify or any big streaming service, but on iTunes.
Just type in Tuesday Night Live,
and whack it in your headphones on the way to work or school. And I don't see anything that maybe an hour and a half might be a little bit long on the way to work. But some of you have long commutes, so who knows?
Who knows? But thank you very much to my co-host Toby for spending so much time with us this evening, and hopefully we'll have no technical issues next week. But really enjoyed that, and hopefully you guys did too. And we will see you on Monday for the Australian Grand Prix 2019 review. Enjoy the weekend, enjoy the race. It's back, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks for watching, folks.